Hello, I'm Tracy Nicholas, and welcome to Folkloring. I am a passionate folklore practitioner, and to me, folkloring is more than just a podcast. It's my commitment to help you connect with your roots and awaken the wisdom within you.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Folkloring. And today I'm here with Lee Morgan. And Lee Morgan is the author of The Rag and Bone Man, which we're going to be talking about today. And Lee lives on a communal homestead on Mount Wellington, where he creates sanctuary for other weirdos, raises books, people, and ideas from the grave. He has had novels and nonfiction published by Collective Ink Books, Three Hands Press, Witch's Almanac, and Rebel Satori. Highlights of his career have involved speaking about his books at Watkins Books in London, receiving an Australian postgraduate award where he got paid to research, and participating in the People's Library artwork in Tasmania. So, welcome, Lee. Thank you for being here today.
Hi, how are you? And no, I'm happy to be here and excited to answer your interesting questions.
Okay, but before we get into that, have you been folkloring lately, and if so, how?
Oh, folklore every day, and I never actually realized how much I did it until I got asked this question, to be honest. My whole process of getting up in the morning is just riddled with it. One of the things I realized is that every time I engage with any form of the natural world, I have a folkloric process that I'm doing without even really thinking about it. And I think that's why this kind of thing is really valuable because it gets you thinking about it, about how you engage with the world. And I realized that even the way I wash my hands in the morning is geared by folklore. I won't flick water off my hands first thing in the morning because it diminishes your good luck force for the day. Um, I bless my fire when I light the fire, which is our main form of heating up here. So that's a very sort of ancestral kind of activity where I'm calling on my foremothers to keep my space warm and blessing it. You know, all of those processes and even cooking and everything is all riddled with various law. And yeah, I didn't actually realize until I sat down and had a good think about it. And I went, yeah. And I think that's the value of folklore is it gets up under your skin, doesn't it?
It really does. And I think that that's so cool that you incorporate it into things you'd be doing anyway. It's
Yeah.
not just like I'm going to add this ritual or whatever. It's just like something that you have to do. And so you think mindfully about how you're doing it. And I think that's fantastic. I love that.
Mm.
Yeah. So as for me, I am a part of a circle. And after having been initiated back in August, I'm in the part of my process now where it is time for me to get and decorate and bless my stang. So I was out tromping around a little bit in the forest preserve looking for that earlier today. I did not find it. I'm gonna go back out there tomorrow because by the time Thursday hits, we're supposed to have snow. So I'm gonna get serious about it. So that's what I've been doing lately. Okay, so let's get into you and what your work is and your books. So can you just start out by introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about you and kind of the path that you've taken thus far to get to where you are today?
Oh, certainly. Okay, so I am living in a Covenstead, as my little bio indicated, and that's always been a dream of mine. I think since I was about 19 years old, I've had this view in my mind that where I wanted to get to was a place where I could live witchcraft on a daily basis with other people who are also in that same situation. And it's due to the housing crisis and many other things, it's taken me us quite a while to communally purchase something together, but we have it. And so that's a big sort of boon in my life that we're living on land that, we collectively own and can stay here. And I think that that deeply changes the way that you engage with folkloric practices because every day you wake up in the same place and you, like, even the kindling that you use is part of a forest that you work with, and it's very integrated, and that's always what I've wanted. Um, I suppose witchcraft has always been with me, whether I realized it or not. Um, but my conscious presence of it would have kicked in when I was a teenager. And I feel like since then, there's been this growing urgency, I suppose, to find a place where that work was welcome. I've sort of grown up separated between my mother's country in the West Country in England
Mm,
and Australia.
hmm.
And yeah, that sort of feeling has followed me, I guess, and I have gone back and forth, thankfully, between those two locations throughout my life and had quite a lot of opportunity to think about the way that place changes and shifts your connection with magic. Um, I hold an officer role in my coven that I've worked with for decades. We have, a beautiful retention rate. We stay together like a family. We are a family. Yeah, and I suppose, well, probably 13 years ago now, I published my first book on the subject, and
Wow.
um, yeah, and that was another ambition that I held,
Hmm.
which I have fulfilled, and it's been an interesting ride.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that the idea of a covenstead is really cool, and you don't hear about it all that much. But my original host on this podcast, Tanya, lived in an eco village, and that was, living in community, same kind of thing. I mean,
Mhm.
they had individual homes and stuff, but they all, had collective land together. And
Yes.
it was very interesting that they were able to come together, decide what the collective work was, how the system was going to work. And they had a point system where you had to do so many hours of work to maintain the
Mhm.
overall property and that kind of thing. But yeah, Covenstead would be amazing because then, and a lot of them were pagan, and they were very into land spirits and nature and stuff. But just the idea of intentionally saying, yeah, we're gonna get together, live together, and do our coven work is an amazing path to take.
We've broken it up a bit though. Like we do have our own sort of sleeping space. Like we've all got a little cabin that's separate where we can go to. And I think that is what makes it work.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like you need that communal space as well as having individual space.
When I think about living in community, of course, I think of Earth Haven where Tanya lived. And so it was
Mhm.
all like they did generate electricity, but the Wi-Fi was like dial up, and this wasn't all that long ago. And they would have to gather, like they had tanks on their roofs to gather rainwater and stuff, and they'd have to purify it, and they had composting toilets and all of that kind of thing. And so that's what I think of as living in community. Is it anything like that, or is it more modern and you just are all sort of collectively there and have maybe communal buildings and stuff?
It's a bit of a combination. We do have a composting toilet, but that's not our only option. We have another one in the house. We had the composting toilet put in because, well, because we wanted to use it for composting, but also because we needed extras and the plumbing just wouldn't allow for extras. But other than that, like we do have a solar panel and such, but we're not reliant on that.
Hmm.
We're close enough to town that we do have town-based electricity, and we have town water too, but it's a very specifically wonderful town water that comes directly off the mountain and hasn't been chlorinated, which is actually
Oh,
very lovely.
oh, I'm
Yeah,
I'm
I,
so jealous. Yeah,
yeah.
where I live, my house was built around about 1897, and obviously we didn't have indoor plumbing then. It didn't come until the 20s here. And so, when all the lead or all the pipes went in, they were running lead pipes. And
Okay.
so, yeah, so the city has lead pipes in some of the older areas of town, which I'm in. And also running into my house is lead pipe. I don't have lead pipe inside, but still, it seems like that's a lot of lead, coming from the city all the way into my house. And
Mm.
so I end up having a water service because I don't want to take the chance. I used to like have it filtered from the fridge and stuff, but I'm like, I'm not taking a chance. So I
Mm.
am very jealous that you have amazing pure water like that because of course, we still have chemicals put in it as well for the city water.
Mm. Yeah, we've been very lucky on a lot of counts.
Okay, so let's talk about your work. Do you want to give us a quick rundown? You said you have novels and nonfiction. Maybe just a quick rundown of what that looks like, and then we can get much more into the Rag and Bone Man, because I want to go into some detail there.
Sure. I've got a few fiction titles coming out at the end of this year, but mainly because Rebel Satori are doing some republications of ones that I've already had published elsewhere, which are part of my so-called haunted book series, which has been called that due to the fact that occasionally my books and the world around me have uncanny similarities that sort of ripple out from them. And the Rag and Bone Man is connected to them, but I'll leave that up to people to work that out how it's connected because all of my books are connected in some way, shape, or form. They're all kind of like a world. And there's little references that you can find in all of them that touch on something that's in the other books.
So you have like your own like Lee Morganverse.
I do a bit. I didn't mean to, it just happened. It's just like my imagination and the way it interacts with the other world, it's kind of networked, and that's sort of what happened
Hmm.
to it. I'm quite excited about the Rag and Bone Man, but you did say we'd talk about that later, so I won't.
We can jump right into that if that's what is on your mind right now.
Oh, well, I mean, it is just because at the moment people are starting to get their copies of it, and that's very exciting to me because this is my first book set here in Tasmania, or Lutruwita,
Oh,
as it's
cool.
called, the Indigenous name for it. Yeah, and to me, that's part of my story about sort of belonging here and not belonging here at the same time. There's that
Mhm.
interaction going on.
Right.
And then I think that book is a big reflection of it. That is the book that I was referring to in my bio, where it says that I was part of an exhibition in the People's Library. And the idea behind that was that writers in Tasmania were invited by a couple of artists named Margaret Woodward and Justy Phillips to contribute a novel that they had written that was set in Tasmania. And they set up this kind of color-coded library, which was beautiful in its own right, which I guess is part of what was artistic about it. And people could just walk in and pick up any book and start reading it.
Hmm.
And there was a lot of performance art things that we were encouraged to do to sort of introduce our book to the public, and that was a fun thing to be a part of because it crossed those boundaries between literature and art,
Right.
and of course our art is in witchcraft. It was like the three of them were all in that together, and I really enjoyed being part of that.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I would have loved to have been able to see that, but I don't get to Tasmania very often.
Very few people do. It's just it's one of the reasons I travel to do workshops a lot of the time. There's not per head of population enough people here.
Right, right. There are advantages because it's nice to live in a little more secluded kind of area. I wish I did. But then, yeah, if you're doing the kind of work where you're selling your creative work, you have to go
Mm.
out peopling sometimes.
You do. It's
Yeah.
true. I mean, I must admit I am here because of the low number of people
Hmm.
per tree, so to
Hmm.
speak. Like we we have way more trees than we have people.
Nice. Okay, so
Mm.
tell us a little bit about the storyline of what the Rag and Bone Man.
Well, originally it was just a novel, but when I approached Crosscrow Books with it, they said to me, one person in particular, who I won't name, but I think you know them, was very into my book Sounds of Infinity, and that has the head, heart, and hands aspect to it.
Right.
And they actually said to me, "We love this. Could you turn it into something more like Sounds of Infinity?
Hmm.
Because I believe there is material in here that you could develop into a grimoire at the end that would be based on the practices that are mentioned inside the novel."
Hmm.
So this book as a whole follows that same process. There is a sort of a, I say it's semi-academic in the sense that it's referenced in the beginning, which sort of explores the themes in a kind of intellectual way that then get unpacked emotionally in the novel part, and then practically in the grimoire part at the end, where I talk people through how they could perform those works. And but this one's a bit more novel heavy than Sounds of Infinity, which is kind of more roughly equal and or not almost equal in size. This has a big chunk of novel in the middle. But most people have said it's been worth it, that they've like even people that are not novel readers have got sucked into it. So it's a powerful story, and so would you like me to talk about the actual structure of the novel itself, or
That makes sense to me that, you have this beginning section where it's like the intellectual, and I believe you call it the head, the heart, and the hand are the three sections.
yes.
I've seen books that have had, about magic, fiction books that have had the spells at the end. Some even have it throughout, but they include the actual spells as sort of an aside, like you can do these spells. But I think that the idea of the upfront format of having this sort of intellectual look at it is so great because you love that moment when you're reading something and like you connect. There's some pop culture reference, or there's something like you've studied a particular goddess or whatever it is, and you're like in on it. You're in on whatever it is they're talking about. And so to sort of give the reader that is really fascinating to me because I think that it will help them connect so much more strongly with what they're reading in the novel. So I really love that idea. I think that's a great idea, and I believe I know who you're talking about when
Yes.
so much enthusiasm there. That's it's great.
Oh, it's lovely. It's lovely for a writer to be on the receiving end of that kind of enthusiasm where they're jumping out of their seats, sort of going, "Oh, what I want you to do is take
Yes.
this novel and do this with it." It's lovely.
That being said, every single person that I've worked with at Crust Crow has that level of enthusiasm.
Mm.
So like the team that I was on was great. But anyway, so okay, let's talk about the actual story, the novel itself. I don't know if you want to talk about the format, it doesn't matter to me. I want to hear about the story.
Yeah, sure. Well, the story sort of came to me from a place which happens to me sometimes when I'm immersed in a place for long enough. I was living on the side of the rivulet in Hobart, and that part of town is quite haunted. It's
Mm,
that there's a lot of heavy, but rich heavy, if you know what I mean, good heavy, like the sort of heavy that you enjoy as an artistic person. And I used to hear it was like the ghost of a fiddle playing is
mhm,
the best way to describe it. And at first I thought that it was someone practicing,
mhm.
and I went looking for it, but I could never find the source of it.
Ooh.
It always disappeared. And I think it's fair to use words like maybe channeled or something of that nature to describe where Henry's character came from. He is the ghost fiddler, and by the end you come to understand why he is the ghost fiddler. But it's his story, and he is sort of identified by his Irish family as a changeling.
Oh.
But it's sort of a concept that's played with a bit. It's never actually confirmed that that is what he is, but the story of it kind of haunts his life, the idea of not really belonging to his family and coming from somewhere else. And He has an extremely switched on second side, and throughout the story, the story is him sort of finding those capacities and going into what would be classed as spiritualism at the time as a way to sort of bridge the gap between the living and the dead. But it's also a love story, and I think that part is important because just to to drop a broad hint, that's the bit that sort of links the story to the other haunted books.
Okay.
There is characters here that will have a familiarity to them to people who've read my other novels, but at the same time, you don't need to have read them. Like it stands alone as a book. But yeah, there is a love story, and it's a queer love story, and it's not a comfortable love story. It is set in a time when, that sort of thing was illegal. Yeah, I think for me, those emotional ends to a story are very important I want the person to really feel that story. It's not just there to put across spells or information. It is actually like well, yeah, the best word I could think of to describe it, I suppose, is something very similar to channeled kind of story, and it comes from very specific places on the rivulet, which are linked to where I set the houses of the two boys that are the main characters, and also of the witch lady that they meet, who is a former convict, and they're very specific in location in my mind where these houses existed or exist.
Is there any aspect of like the land spirits there and why that area is important?
I think there is whispers of them under the surface. I think there definitely is. The rivulet has a character, and I would say the rivulet is a little bit angry in a lot of ways. I think it's like in that time period, it's abused as well in the sense that it's full of pollution and dogs' bodies and in entrails from butchers, and it was filthy like at the time.
Yeah.
And that was the fault of colonization. It had been used as a sewer,
Hmm.
whereas that river, I feel, would have been far more sacred in the past.
Interesting.
And I feel that presence of the way that settling people didn't have the same respectful and animistic relationship with nature is definitely a character in the background of
Mhm.
that story for sure.
That's very interesting. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the changeling aspect of it because in a lot of older folklore, the changeling was code for maybe it was Down syndrome or autism or whatever it was, right? When a child was different, that was sort of the supernatural reason that they brought forth, and it often did not go well for the child. They would leave them out in the woods and they would die of exposure and all sorts of terrible things because people really strongly believed like no, this is the fairies, and it's horrible and tragic. But it sounds like this character Henry was like stayed within part of the family and wasn't as ostracized.
Well, yes, they did, but his father believes that he is the cause of the death of all of his other siblings,
Oh.
even though he hasn't actually done anything to hurt them, just simply by existing. The fact that he's left alone with his father and his mother and his siblings have died is definitely seen as a result of his presence in the house. But
Hmm.
I think because his father is left only with him,
Hmm.
he is allowed to stay for sure. But there definitely is like lots of prohibitions, like
Hmm.
magical prohibitions that are placed on him. And, he's not allowed to wind the clock back up, and he's not allowed to touch the milk, and he's not allowed to do all these different things because it's believed that his changeling nature will sour the milk, or that it will, have various effects on the household if he is to do those things. So his life is definitely held by that. At the same time, though, I feel that I have also produced a neurodivergent character. Like, I do think he is autistic by modern standards for certain. And I think that I've played with that a little bit with the idea, is he a queer neurodivergent person or is he a changeling? Which story is the one to believe, sort of thing, or is it both
Right.
in some way? So, yeah.
It's great to have stories with characters like this because they're real people. They should be represented within stories. And I think that it's important. I think it's almost jarring to modern people to be like changeling, right? And like hopefully that kind of focus on it will help people be like, well, maybe I need to rethink my prejudices against some of these people because,
Mm,
there's still a lot of difficulty in people that are autistic navigating the world because the world tells them that the way that they think and the way that they behave is wrong.
mm,
And as children, they get punished for it. I think it's getting better, right?
mm,
But they are certainly treated as if there is a problem with that person and not the system around them. So, to have that
mm,
like superstition that it's like, oh, a changeling, especially with all of the
mm,
things that the character can't do around the house
hmm.
because like, oh, that's bad luck for this or that. And I want to know, like, are those like, is that a real superstition that like certain people can't like wind the clock back up for fear of bad luck?
Yeah, for sure. And also in the beginning where I talk about the reasons behind the decisions I've made in the novel, like I don't actually explicitly say that, but if you read the two together, you can see that what I'm exploring there is the way that the concept of a changeling had altered by the Victorian age. It wasn't the
Mhm.
same as it would have been a few hundred years earlier, and that there's a different, it still existed, particularly in Irish culture and some other sort of, groups that were on the edges of modernization, I guess is the best way to put it. But there was a specific way it had changed, and it still existed though. And yes, there was a lot of prohibitions, I guess, about certain things that were not correct for you to do if you were a changeling. Yeah, and exploring that was actually a real privilege that Crosscrow gave me by saying, could I do the head part at the beginning? Because I had done that research. I had actually immersed myself in that time period and what it meant to be seen as a changeling.
That's really fascinating to me because when we talk about, some of these characters like a changeling, I've always heard about sort of the really horrible older beliefs, right? Because it's shocking and it's horrible. And, to go leave a child out in the woods to die of exposure because they're, and thinking they could go back and get their actual baby. But I had not heard of sort of this less harsh version. And
Mm.
so that's fascinating to me and a good reminder that we can lose folklore, right?
Yeah.
Because until you said that, like nobody's talking about that period of time and that particular, ill luck that's associated with it. And I'd be fascinated to read more about it because if that's what you believe, that your child is a changeling, right?
Mm.
Wouldn't you still want to get your actual child back? And so I
Yeah,
wonder
for
about,
sure.
yeah,
Mm.
and you just be like, well, we'll just raise this changeling, I guess, hope the fairies
Mm.
are being good to real Henry.
Yeah.
So I
Mm.
definitely want to dive more into that, and I'm gonna have to check that out because like that bit of folklore, and that's like a sort of more of not a transition period, but just like a different time where people were becoming less and less superstitious. But we lose folklore, right?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And I think that's something I feel, I guess because as I was saying to you earlier, folklore is not a separate thing to my life. It
Hmm.
really is embedded in my life, and I recognize there to be several large benefits from it. And I think that that loss would be a real shame. Like I feel there's almost a form of intelligence, I think, that is linking our intellectual and imaginative life with our body. I
Hmm.
think it's a very sensory type of intelligence that comes from carrying out those same rituals each morning to the extent that lighting the fire and washing my hands and all this sort of thing, they're embedded with a sacred meaning.
Hmm.
And if you were to lose that, you lose the sacred meaning. Like you're lighting a fire, this is an incredibly powerful act in the household. This is like starting off your hearth, and it's sacred, to Saint Brige or Bridget, either or whatever entity you associate with the hearth. It's conjuring her up when you light it. You know, your whole body is immersed in it. Like, I picked up the actual cortisol response from my grandmother's body when somebody tried to put their shoes on the table or spilt salt or something like that. She had like an actual our lives are in danger kind of level of, oh my God, don't touch that. Oh God, don't put that on the table. You'll kill us all. And it sounds really intense, like to some people, but for her, that was actually blamed. If somebody, passed away unexpectedly, she would link it to the fact that someone broke one of those taboos. Like it was really intense. And my childhood body caught that cortisol jolt, and I went, oh God, never ever do that. I
Right.
can't even see it done on television. If someone puts shoes on a table, it instantly have this like someone's gonna die feeling go through my body.
Question. So
Yes,
if I go shopping, right, and I
yes.
go buy a pair of shoes, and they're in the box, they're in a bag, is that okay to put on the table, or is that still like too much?
My understanding of it is that the table has to be long enough to lay out a body on. If your body could be laid out on that table and you put shoes on it, then it evokes the process of dressing a body for death. But if it's a little tiny counter, it's fine. And especially if it's in a box, I think
Mhm.
you can get away with that. But yeah, that's what lies behind it, obviously, was that people used to dress bodies in the home. So,
Interesting. I will say that the whole process of lighting the fire. So, like I said, I live in an older house, and at a certain point, there were small like wood burning stoves in various bedrooms and different rooms, and that they got taken out, and then there was a chimney put in, and that was, where everything vented out. And at a certain point, I got a high efficiency, heater, and I got a continuous water heater that both vented out the side of the house. So the chimney was completely useless that had been added in. And it took up a big portion of my front room because it was added on. There was no place in between rooms to put it, like when you build it into a
mm.
house. But I really wanted a fireplace. So I ended up ripping out the chimney because it was in the way. And so I ripped it out. I got so much more space in here. It was great. But then I wanted a fireplace. So I got a ventless gas fireplace. And so when you talk about the ritual of building it, and of course it's like I hate that I don't have the lovely like burning smell and all of that, but it is very warm and my house gets really cold.
Mm.
But when I go to, and I'll put this in air quotes for those of you listening, when I go to light the fire, I pick up the remote and I just hit the remote and the fire comes on. So it's like I'm like, oh, I don't get any ritual. I'm just like turning it on like the TV.
Oh, but look, towards the end of winter, I have fantasies about turning it on like a TV. I sit there and I think about heat pumps and things like that. At the beginning of winter, like the beauty of the ritual is predominant, but I'm at the end. Well, we're in spring now, but we still occasionally have to light the fire because we live halfway up a mountain. It's cold here. We
Hmm.
get snow and everything, so it is a chore.
Hmm.
But making that chore sacred,
Yeah.
it does give you something to hold on to, and you can understand why our ancestors did this kind of thing they didn't have other opportunities. So I reckon they would have probably pressed a button if they could too. Like a lot of them would have probably opted for that. And trust me, I'm not saying this will last forever. I may eventually also have a high power heater.
Yeah.
I don't know. But at the moment, it's a fire. And yeah, I do a whole process every time I light them. Even sometimes I'm tired when I'm doing it, but I do do it.
The times where either something has happened, like it's the furnace is broken, or sometimes if I'm recording something that needs to be really high quality, I turn off the heat because I have forced air and I don't want that background noise to be coming in and out. And I forget until morning to turn it back on. And
Mm.
on those mornings when the heat has not been on overnight and it's winter, man, that's very unpleasant until I get it figured
Mm.
out. Just getting out from under the covers is painful because you're thinking, this
Yes.
is the last time I'm going to not be cold for many, many hours. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I can relate to that quite heavily.
Now, you talked about some of the superstitions that were passed down. Well, you talked about a couple superstitions passed down from your grandmother. Do you have others, or maybe some other family folklore that you could share with us?
Yes, I do. I would say that a lot of them are contextual to something happening in the house. Like a dropped knife on the floor was always a very big deal in Nan's
Mhm.
kitchen. She would like stare at the knife and go, "We will have a gentleman caller today." You know, there was and this was all taken very seriously. Like because I think I mentioned to you last time we talked that there was a difference between my grandfather and my grandmother in that respect.
Right.
That he came from somewhere in London where they were middle class aspirational, and he sort of scorned the fact that she believed this kind of thing, and he would sort of put her down, and for believing this kind of thing. And I think that's sort of typical of where these stories go. Like she became a bit more inward with them after that.
Right.
But because I am relentless with this sort of thing, I have asked a lot of questions of a lot of people in the family, and some of them I know from actually observing my grandmother, but a lot of them I know from just doing little mini interviews and stuff on different family members and getting them to tell me the different things that they heard from Nan or that they heard from my great auntie, or even occasionally a little snippet here and there from my great grandmother.
Hmm.
And my great grandmother used to read tea leaves, and
Oh.
both my grandmother and great auntie used to read cards as well as tea leaves. And so there's a lot of divination going on and a lot of interpretation of symbols, obviously, because, when a symbol comes up in the tea leaves, it means a particular thing, as does the appearance of certain animals and at certain times. And one of the things that jumps out in my mind is that one of my uncles, well, actually, multiple members of my family identify a robin if they see one as being the soul of my grandmother.
Oh.
That's just understood that she's come back as an animal.
Was she particularly connected to robins? Did she like them? Did she collect like little robin figurines or something?
She had some robin figurines, but I think, yes, she was connected to them when we were putting her ashes in the communal spot where all of the other ancestors are actually buried. But you're not allowed to put any more people in that cemetery anymore. It's got Lawrence of Arabia's body in the cemetery in Morton, so it's like this very special cemetery now, and you can't get buried there unless you were born there. But you can get your ashes put there if your family are in there. So yeah, only ashes go in the grave now. And when we were putting Nan in there, Robin came and sat on the headstone of her mother, and my uncle said, "Oh, there she is."
Wow.
Just and that's been an ongoing thing that my mother and my auntie all identify when a robin turns up to say that that's my grandmother.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's really
It
cool.
is interesting, isn't it? Like the idea, and it survives side by side with Christianity.
Hmm.
Like if you asked my family what their religion was, they would say they were High Church of England. Yet, at the same time, they also, believe in the good folk. They don't talk about them very often because they're scared of them. They
As you should
believe,
be, as you should be.
yes, yeah. They believe that people can reappear as animals. They believe in a series of different omens, and yeah, my auntie even has argued in favor of reincarnation as being a possible outcome after death. And I've sort of said to her, but where's that in the Bible? And she's, oh, it's in there, it's in there.
Well, I mean, it does spring to mind of Jesus.
I suppose so, yeah.
I guess that's
True.
resurrection. That's resurrection, not reincarnation.
Yeah. But I think 'cause she's never read it, you see. Like a lot of people, this kind of folk Christianity of the type that kind of comes down to them as a mixture. There's quite a lot of saints and things like that that are venerated in my family, even though saints are not technically, I don't think, really part of the Church of England. Nonetheless, they're embedded in the land. And that's the thing, because like before Weymouth, my family came from Abbotsbury, and that is connected to St. Catherine and the big St. Catherine's Hill there. And she has an eight-spoked wheel. And it's very, it's like a tiny, tiny gloss over the top of something ancient and pagan, like it's a tiny gloss. And yeah, these sainthood things are part of the way they experience place.
Hmm.
Like she's part of that mound.
Right.
Um,
I think it's really interesting. When you were talking about the robin earlier, and now we're talking about being tied to place, I was wondering to myself, because a while back I had a friend of mine come stay with me for like 10 days from the UK. And there's a very common bird around here. And he saw it and he was like trying to take pictures of things that, he didn't experience back in England. And he saw it and he's like, "Ooh, what kind of bird is that?" And I looked at him like he was crazy. I was like, "That's a robin." And he's like, "No, it's not." I'm like, "Yeah, that's a robin." And then so we went and looked, and the robins here look very different than the robins there. And like to the point where he didn't recognize it. And the robins here they're dark, they're sort of dark and speckled, and their entire chest is bright red. And that's really
okay.
that's how they look. And when I was a
Mm,
little kid, we used to call them robin redbreast. And I didn't know why. And then when I learned that they looked so different, I was like, oh, that's probably like part of the origin of why, we were defining it, but we had to say it's this very special kind of robin. And it's one of the most common birds around here. I mean, maybe crows are more common, but
mm.
robins are everywhere. And so it was so surprising to me. And I wonder, when I'm thinking of this robin flying down and landing on the headstone, right? I'm thinking of my robin.
Mhm.
I wasn't thinking about the UK robins,
Mm.
but that's how we tie to the land.
Yeah, exactly. And we have two different types of robin here in Tasmania too that are different. Like we have one that has a red breast, but it doesn't have the same call as the
Mm.
robin in England, and it doesn't behave the same. And we've also got a pink-breasted one
Oh,
here as well. But my mother identifies them both as being her mother.
okay.
Yeah, she makes the jump in the form of a robin to all this way down to the bottom of the world.
That's funny that your mom does just identify whichever robin. It isn't like a particular kind.
No, it doesn't need to be. No,
Okay, so can you tell us where people can find your work and your books and all the other stuff that you do?
well, my website is a really good place to go for links to all of my books, which is leemorgansbooks.com and my Patreon as well. I can provide links. They're all probably the the easiest place to find my writing and also my online writing too, because there is a fair amount of that. And yeah, I think that that'd be like the main hubs.
Okay, great. I will put the links in the show notes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
that sounds good. Okay, before we wrap it up, do you have any other thoughts for people listening?
Yeah, I suppose what I'd like to mention is that I don't know what kind of shape it's going to take yet, but I'm interested in pursuing some research, possibly towards a PhD thesis on folklore. Like I'm thinking of, well, not exactly on folklore, but on looking at the way that somewhere between the 1700s and now, when you read historical records of it, you can see that the way that people experience the spirit world has changed.
Yeah,
There's a part of the brain that started to analyze things differently in the modern world, and I would like to look at that, and I'd like to do a head, heart, and hands kind of investigation into that. So something I'd be really interested in would be hearing from people who produce art or various actions that could be part of the hands part where we they would be open to me sort of looking at the impact of some of their work on people. I don't know what form that would take yet, but if anyone's interested in being part of something like that, I'd love to hear from them.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's one thing where my work is going next.
That's really cool. It immediately brought to mind that like even a lot of ritual is very kind of artistic and very hands-on way that we connect with stories, like connect with our ancestors and connect with stories that have come to us because we develop a lot of our ritual practices from what other people have been doing and talking about, even though we personalize them.
Yes, I really like that's a topic I'm really interested in. And I think because we have, you probably haven't heard of it, but we've got Mona down here, which is a museum of old and new art in Tassie, and it's based around that concept that art and ritual are kind of almost the same thing
Yeah,
in a way.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm interested in exploring different techniques that and to see what effect they have on people, whether they open people up to more lucid dreams or seeing things and maybe not questioning how they saw it. Like, opening up those capacities in people. I'd like to know what is the trick to opening people's sight back up almost, I guess.
Yeah, and it's it's so interesting because you can't experience and you can't do what you don't believe is possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so the people who are like, there's no possible way that there's any such thing as an afterlife or spirits or anything like that, they're gonna put off hearing like a voice calling their name, like, oh, that must have just been somebody I overheard the radio as they were zipping by me in a car, or somebody used a name very similar sounding to mine, or there was a word
Mm-hmm.
and they'll just justify themselves out of it. Whereas, when someone who is much more of a believer hears their name call out or a very distinct knock on their door and no one's there or whatever it is, they'll be like, okay, well, what message is trying to come to me? And so then they experience that in a very much of a divination way of
Mm.
why would I be getting a message? And as a folklorist, and I say this all the time, people are going to be so bored of this. As folklorist, it doesn't matter to me whether or not it's true. What matters is if people believe it, what they believe, and why. And maybe it is true. I'm not going to be the judge of that. But like any divination, it's about the interpretation, right?
Mm.
And you can say, I see a dragon, but then you say, what does that dragon mean? Right? In your tea
Mm-hmm.
leaves or whatever. Yeah, I think that's really interesting
Yeah.
work. It's interesting work.
I'd like to look more closely at what effect that has on us as well, even if it's not viewed as true. Like that interaction with symbols, that interpretation of symbols on the daily basis. I think there's something about that that is like quite enriching to the human mind. And all of that is something I'm very interested in delving more deeply into.
Oh, that's so cool. And I think that a lot of it comes down to practice.
Mm.
It's like working out. If you're not connecting with your spirituality, with the folklore and symbolism in your life, you get out of practice. You can't
Mm.
just go like you haven't meditated in 6 months and you're like, I'm going to be here for an hour and I'm good, you know? It's like trying to go back to a workout that you abandoned a year ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe it is that simple. Perhaps what I will discover is that the main tr thing was that people were taught to doubt their experiences and that they didn't believe what they were experiencing. And so we've got this extra voice in our head going, is that a real thing or is that a hallucination? Sort of thing that's always like nipping away at the back of our head. But maybe it's more profound things as well. Like I want to experiment with like going for a few days without electricity or not staring at a screen or, just different things that we've changed in our lives to
Right.
see the impact
Yeah, we should
of.
definitely talk more about this in the future because the last
Mm.
couple of chapters of my book are about how to get out of your own way with your magical practice and how to improve your magical practice. And so I've got some ideas if you want to
Yeah,
talk
I
about it.
do, absolutely. I'll have a look at your book for sure.
Yeah.
We can look at each other's books now.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. This was very interesting, and I am so looking forward to both reading The Rag and Bone Man and seeing what work that you're going to be pursuing in the future because it sounds just absolutely intriguing.
Thank you. And it's been great to talk to you as well. Thanks for having me.
As always, thank you for listening to Folkloring. If you have any questions or comments or would like to suggest a topic for a future episode, please email us at folkloringpod@gmail.com or message us on Blue Sky, Facebook, or Instagram. Other places you can find me are at the Folklore Podcast as the theater, film, and storytellers correspondent or creating folklore-inspired games at madmenandheroes.com. Stay curious, stay connected, and keep the traditions alive. And I hope that wherever you are, folklore is making your life more magical.